We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts. Hello, and welcome to Storied San Francisco. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. This episode is part 3 of our San Francisco Cemeteries series. Once again, we'll hand the mic over to Courtney Minnick of Here Lies a Story. Courtney will continue our city graveyards tour with Alma deBretteville Spreckels and the building of the Legion of Honor. At the end of this episode, we'll meet Kathy McCall, who will talk all about the San Francisco National Cemetery located in the Presidio. Join us next week for the final podcast in this series, all about the pet cemetery in the Presidio. Here's Courtney Minnick.
So the Legion of Honor was built in, I want to say 1921 is when they broke ground. The Legion of Honor was dedicated to the dead from World War I, right?
Right.
Super atrocious, horrible, violent, bloody war.
Yes.
Also, as we went through COVID, I was thinking that was the flu pandemic that happened in 1919, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people died from that too, right? So it's just a lot of, there's a lot of trauma in the culture.
Right.
They go to build this museum here. They had an idea that there could be some remains, but I don't think anybody told them there's a whole fucking cemetery down there. Can I swear? Sorry, I'll take.
Of
you
course.
Can okay.
No,
I'm
please.
trying to keep it clean, but I don't think they were. It seems from the accounts that they were not prepared for what they found, because when now this is the 20s, they have equipment now, right?
Better equipment.
And they're in there excavating. And they're just finding bodies and bodies and bodies. It's something like 1,500 bodies on the first pass for the Legion of Honor.
Right.
So imagine you're a worker up here, 1921, right? Alma Spreckels, the sugar baroness, is like, I got a story about her too. We're going to build this museum. Here you go, break ground. We're going to put it here. It's modeled after some crazy French building. It's like so sophisticated.
It's a beautiful building.
It's a very nice building.
Yeah.
It's very nice. And you start to dig in, and it's just bodies, right?
Like skeletons.
Skeletons, coffins.
Rotted coffins, probably.
And honestly, the other thing that I think you need to keep in mind is some of these people could have been buried like only 20 years prior.
Right.
It's not that old.
Right.
It's like where your grandma's buried.
I was going to say the families might still be here.
Yes. It's not an ancient cemetery from, the 1500s. It's only 20 years old. And so...
And obviously unmarked, and there's no ID on these.
No.
None.
And just imagine...
No hope even of getting an ID.
Just imagine,
Nothing.
like you're that guy. Maybe you just came back from World War I. Maybe you just went through this flu pandemic.
Yeah.
And here you come across all these bodies.
Yep.
So what they did, according to...
Excuse me, boss. I got to show you something.
What they did was they just kind of pushed them over into a heap.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't move them. They moved them out of the way for the museum.
They just made a mound?
They just made a mound. It's actually, oh God, I can't believe I know these things. It was called a charnel heap.
Okay.
Which is, charnel is bones, right? It's just like a heap of bones and they just reburied it over there.
Do we know where?
It's like somewhere on the site. And so the reason we know this is that in the 1990s, they did another renovation on this museum where they excavated down even further to build a subterranean facility down there.
Okay.
And they found another 800 bodies.
Jesus
right?
Christ.
And they also found the heaps of bones,
God.
that support the accounts from the 1920s.
Charnel
Charnel heaps,
heap.
yeah.
Okay.
And, in addition to another 800 or so that are under there.
As you're telling me this, I'm like looking around and expecting fingers to just pop up.
You could have punked me so hard by putting like a little skeleton bone out somewhere. I would have been like, oh,
damn
Jeff.
it. Okay.
Well, I mean,
Next time.
They're still
here.
They still
gotta
find
be.
remains when
There's
they
gotta
do
be.
projects over here, right? Like the groundskeepers, there's houses over here.
Yeah.
Seacliff, right? Like
right.
nice
Seacliff Manor.
houses.
Yeah.
They
But for the golf
find-
course
yeah.
purposes, they didn't have to necessarily dig. For something like Legion of Honor and
they had to
housing,
excavate.
you have to
Exactly.
go down. So
yeah,
that makes
for this,
sense.
it's just like you were saying, cemeteries and golf courses, right? It just looks the same. It's just grass and some kind of rolling hills here.
And a lawnmower, probably.
Obstacles, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it, right?
Okay.
That's why you would never know.
But that is what you just mentioned about the renovations at Legion of Honor. Now we're getting into the 21st century.
Yes.
So very recent history.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And so...
What did they do with their findings?
Well, so in the 1990s, they couldn't just kick them over into the corner, right? So
I would hope not, but...
we had a little more infrastructure. So the medical...
And oversight.
So
was anyone...
I mean, here's the thing about the oversight. I don't want to get in trouble with the Legion of Honor because I don't want to be slanderous.
Sure.
But they hired an archaeologist because, again, they knew. They're like, there could be bones here.
Right.
And Legion of Honor was on like a pretty tight timeline, it seems like, to get this renovation done. And they're a nonprofit, so they have to probably answer to their board, and they're losing money and whatever.
Not gobs of money.
And they were kind of like, get it done, right? There's a quote from the, maybe it was a curator or director at the time, who said, it's interesting, but it's not exactly King Tut's tomb down there, right?
Oh, my God.
Which, first of all,
Yeah.
I used to work in communications, and that's a money-ass quote. But also, it kind of shows you the attitude. It was
Correct.
like, look, Legion of Honor, they have ancient history in there, right? Greek and Roman, and it's been a while since I've been in there, classical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't really interested in the local San Francisco history that was
Right.
down here. And I think part of it is that it's poor folks buried here, right? This
sure
is
that
not.
comes into it.
These are the workers. These are the people who built San Francisco. They're not the senators and the socialites. It's not Alma, deBretteville, Spreckels down there, right? Although, can I tell my Alma story now?
Yes, please.
While I have you, while I'm
Yes,
on the
please.
topic. So, Alma had a custom tomb designed for her and her husband underneath the Legion of Honor.
Okay. But after the Legion of Honor was already built?
When she built it,
Okay.
she had them install a custom tomb. She
Okay.
wanted to be buried down there. I don't think she knew that there were 1,500 poor people down there already.
Right.
I think she just thought it would be a good place to be buried. She was not buried there because
If you don't know that,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, but it's
The
kind
less
of
you know.
I don't know. Like, what is this? Like irony? Maybe, I'm not sure.
Right.
It's very once again, it's very San Francisco, isn't it?
All this, and I will editorialize here. It
Please.
speaks to how some of us, a lot of us, view other people, view individuals, view classes of people.
Yeah.
That all of this that we're talking about could even happen in the first place. But
Yeah, for sure. The fact that no one was paying attention out
right.
here when the city said they were going to move 20,000 bodies and they just didn't.
Right.
No one followed up.
And it's already predating all that. It's
Yeah.
already conquered land.
Yeah, for sure. Oh,
So-
for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes, but it's deep.
It's so
deep roots.
Deep. Again,
And you'll
deep.
find
It goes
for
deep.
sure. Well, actually, I don't think, and I'm not sure actually how deep the burials are out here either. That's another thing.
That goes shallow.
It's kind of, they're not actually that
Yeah.
far below. So I
Yeah.
think that's why the remains turn up a lot of times in construction projects and things like that.
Right.
And again, it just makes it all the more ironic that
Mm-hmm.
they're so close and you have no idea when you're out here, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now Courtney will talk about San Francisco's Big Four cemeteries, which were located near and around the intersection of Geary and Masonic.
And, the other cemetery that did a good job of moving, we haven't covered the big four cemeteries, which are in the center. We're in the center of the city. But the Catholic, there was a Catholic cemetery there. And the Catholic Church, for once, did a thorough
did it right
and ethical job
of
removing the people to Colma.
You said the big four, like the big four?
Yeah.
The
so
Stanford,
not
Huntington,
not
Crocker?
the robber barons.
Okay.
No, but close. I mean, the big four, right. This is named for the big four cemeteries. So they, I don't know if that's a term they used later, like historians use that term, or if they used it at the time.
Okay.
So the big four were four private cemeteries in the what is now kind of like the geographic center of the city, like Western Addition. What would you call that? Nopa? I don't know.
Western Addition.
Yeah. So
I can tell you the names because I live where you're talking about. I can tell you our sort of
what's your
tongue-in-cheek
name?
names. So where I live, we call it West of Target or Weetar for short.
Weetar.
And then another it also works is Lower Trader Joe's.
Perfect. Yeah, because exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the four cemeteries that were out there, it was big. It was like a massive amount of land. Because again, they thought this is good land to put it on because we're never going to use this land, right? Obviously, that was wrong. But it was Calvary Cemetery, which was the Catholic cemetery.
Okay.
Masonic, which was the Masons, right? Illuminati. The Odd Fellows.
And the street named for them right there.
Yeah,
there you
exactly.
Go. The
That's
Odd Fellows.
Masonic, yeah. The Odd Fellows Cemetery. So the Odd Fellows was where Rossi Park is.
Yeah.
Arguello.
Yep, I was just there this morning.
Calvary was Target.
Okay.
That was Target.
That was Catholic.
That was Catholic. Masonic was where USF is now.
Lone Mountain.
Lone Mountain.
Okay.
And then Laurel Cemetery was where Laurel Heights is.
Okay.
Like Laurel Village.
Laurel Village.
There. Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually stopping there after this recording to get an avocado.
So I think I don't know.
It's all coming together.
It's like that area right there where like there's like a bunch of hospitals and stuff there now. I think.
Yeah, and like clinics and
Yeah.
MRI facilities and stuff like that.
The entrance to Laurel Cemetery was it might have been Laurel Hill Cemetery. I don't know. Is where that fire museum is now.
Yep.
That's where the gates were. So,
okay.
Yeah. So
near the JCC and all that.
Yeah. Cemetery.
Okay.
So
that's the big four that you referred to
those are the big
earlier.
four. Yeah.
Okay.
Laurel, Masonic,
Calvary,
and Oddfellows.
And when time-wise would this have been?
So this would have been late 1800s, I think, is when they kind of started constructing those.
Okay.
And in 1900, the city of San Francisco said, okay, no more cemeteries, right?
Period.
You got to stop. Yeah, we're not using any more land for cemeteries. And then what happened was just like your friend was saying, they ran out of money. So back in the day, the cemeteries were not, nowadays we have perpetual care funds and things like that. They kind of plan for, in the event that the cemetery goes bankrupt or whatever, who's going to take care of this? Probably the government would step in too. But back then, they kind of went into disrepair and they just fell apart.
Okay.
And San Francisco wanted to use that land, right? There was a lot of pressure from the business associations, the improvement associations, because the conditions were so bad at the cemeteries when they went into disrepair that the neighbors did not want it, right? Everybody, it was, they were becoming a nuisance. The city eventually passed a law saying, you have to move these bodies. We're eminent domaining all of this. And starting in the late 1930s, they started moving the bodies to Colma.
Was it was the city saying specifically move them to Colma, or how specific did they get? Okay. Okay.
And so, some of them, so like Calvary, Catholic, right? So the diocese took over. They had the funds to move it and everything, right? So that one was supposed to be the best one.
Okay.
Allegedly, no one got left behind because
Okay.
they were very. They did a good job. They paid attention.
They took care of
They
their
were
own.
conscientious. They were taking care of their own.
And they had the resources to do so.
And they had the resources. Yep. Let's see. Masonic is kind of a mystery what happened there. Because I would think that the Masons are like an international organization,
good job,
right?
You'd think.
But we know that a lot of people got left behind from Masonic, too.
Okay.
Because when they did construction projects at USF, they found bodies.
Yeah.
So, like, quite a few bodies.
Yeah.
I think there's, like, a dorm or something that was built, I want to say, like, in the 1960s, 1970s. And they found something like 300 bodies down there.
Okay.
So.
But then, sorry, go back quickly to Calvary, which is where Target used to be Sears, all that. City Center is what they call it now. But when they were building that, they didn't find any?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I saw
that we know of.
That we know of. I saw one picture, or maybe it was an article or something, about how they found stones. So like markers.
Right.
Because a lot of the markers, they couldn't reuse that stuff. So a lot of the markers, actually, from all of those big cemeteries went into public works projects. I don't know if you know about that.
Let's hear about it.
But they had tons and tons of granite and marble, right?
Really nice stone.
Nice stone. So it went into different public works projects because nobody wanted it and they couldn't sell it. Yeah. So there's a breakwater out at Ocean Beach that is like tombs.
Gravestones.
So sometimes when the tide is out at the right way, you can see them.
Can you read stuff, or like an old cemetery where like you can tell it's engraved, but
it is probably worn down from the ocean.
Pretty worn. Erosion,
but
yeah.
Out at Buena Vista Park, which is in the Upper Haight, the pathways through the park are lined with old gravestones, and some of those you can see writing on.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah. So they're supposed to be flipped over, but if you go walk through there, you'll see some of them you can see numbers and letters.
Do you know much about the columbarium?
I know a little bit about the columbarium.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so the columbarium was originally part of the Oddfellows Cemetery.
Okay.
So, it's over there.
And it's right across from Rossi Park,
behind
essentially.
Rossi Park. Yeah. And a columbarium is a place where you store ashes.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a mausoleum. It's indoors. And
above ground.
Yeah, but it's all ashes. Above ground, indoors, and there are I think it's several levels, and there are little niches where you put the ashes. And it's a beautiful building.
Totally.
It's like stained glass. It's beautiful from the outside. It's beautiful on the inside. It's an incredible, architecturally, it's beautiful.
Right.
And then also the little niches, they're really cool because people put their little flair in there, right? So
love it.
You can leave things, but also people have their niches decorated with photographs and little tchotchkes, and it's personal. So yeah, it's kind of a cemetery.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's where remains are.
Yeah.
And how far does the columbarium's history go back?
I would imagine it goes back to when the Oddfellows Cemetery does. I'm not.
So late
1800s,
sure. Probably?
I think probably. Okay. Yeah. It looks like they are expanding it.
Oh.
There are some grounds that have kind of been built up around. You should go over there and see. It looks like they're adding space, space to store remains on the grounds.
Are they open to the public?
Yes.
Okay.
You can just go in there. And I assume they're still taking remains if they're expanding it.
They have the space.
Yeah, they have the space.
And it
doesn't take that much room. Yeah.
The developer lobby hasn't kicked them out of San Francisco yet.
Not yet.
Can you speak at all to Presidio, since we're going to be going there as well? I know you said not the pet cemetery, but the National Cemetery, which I guess was created by the U.S. Army, or? Yeah,
the National Cemetery, as I understand it, I think you can. It's a veteran cemetery, right? So it's owned by the federal government, operated by the federal government. I went over there on Memorial Day to get pictures because, they have the flags out and everything. And something that was interesting to me when I was over there is they don't just have the white kind of like military headstones.
The Arlington Cemetery style.
They're very uniform. Right. There's a bunch of other different kind of headstones there too.
Okay,
and
I
guess you could place your own marker. Some people have family plots. So it would be a member served, and then
Their family,
wives or children are buried there with them.
For me, like I haven't been in that cemetery. I've only really driven by, and I'm always like, oh, it looks like the one in DC.
Yeah, because
there's some down like San Bruno or
San Bruno
off the 280. You can, and I'm always like, oh, the U.S. has a way of doing graveyards for their military.
They surely do, and it's just like the military, right? Everything is uniform. Everybody gets the same size. I think it doesn't matter what your rank is. You get.
I like that actually.
I like it too, and it's very it's like the military. It's very orderly, right? That shit is in straight lines. Nobody's getting left behind over there, right? So it is, and it was nice to go on Memorial Day and see all the flags. I'm not like a huge rah-rah. But it was nice to see.
Were there people out there?
There were.
Nice.
Yeah. I think for Memorial Day, that's kind of a thing. Like, people might go.
Next, we'll meet Kathy McCall, director of the San Francisco National Cemetery. Are there still burials happening at the National Cemetery?
There are, not very many, but we still have burials primarily when spouses pass away. They're being buried with the spouses already at the cemetery.
Got it. In little family plots kind of thing.
We don't call them family plots, but yes, in existing grave sites. That's correct.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's go back. I want to hear. I'm guessing that you're an expert on these matters. What is how far back does this National Cemetery go? And if you want to talk about the Army's presence in the Presidio as sort of context or anything that you want to bring in to the story, I'd love to hear that.
Well, San Francisco National Cemetery was designated as a national cemetery in 1884. It was the first national cemetery on the West Coast, but its history predates that back to the 1850s, along with the U.S. Army's presence on the Presidio.
So since the Presidio had been here, it had always been sort of a burial ground, or how formal was it before the national designation?
It was probably a post cemetery, and I'm not sure what the history of that is. But when it was designated as a national cemetery, then they encompassed part of that space and then enlarged it. I believe the initial size was 9 acres, and today its final size is 28 acres.
Oh, wow, that's substantial. So, and that was in you said 1884?
1884 is when it was designated a national cemetery. There are earlier burials from the 1850s.
Okay, and those would have been primarily of U.S. Army officers and?
Primarily soldiers with U.S. Army, but the history also encompasses civilians from that time, because this was the only cemetery on the base. And so it served a wider range back then than the VA does today. The VA has regulations about who is eligible for burial in a national cemetery, but by virtue of being the only cemetery on the post back in the 1800s, they included others as well.
What kind of civilians? What types of people?
People who worked on the post, just civilians that served in capacities on the post, working along with the soldiers there.
Okay.
And then the cemetery also includes burials from other post cemeteries in the West, California, Oregon, I think Nevada, Washington. When those Army posts closed, they would remove the remains, and many of them were relocated to San Francisco National Cemetery.
Okay, that's interesting. And then my understanding is that the Army's presence, the U.S. Army's presence at the Presidio sort of came to an end late 80s, early 90s of the 20th century. So about 100 years or so later.
Yeah. Well, the VA actually took over almost all of the cemeteries in 1973 by an act of Congress. And so before the Army even moved out, the cemetery itself as well as most other national cemeteries, switched over to be under the jurisdiction of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Got it. Okay, that was going to be my question. Is now that the Army isn't there anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because in between the Veterans Affairs, the VA took over.
Right.
Is that right? And
Right.
That's why the VA continues to run.
Exactly. It's just a little VA island within the national park itself that we continue to maintain.
Right. Okay. And you said 20, is it 28 acres?
28 acres, yes.
And can you tell us approximately how many people are buried or otherwise?
There are a little over 26,000 grave sites and a little over 32,000 individuals buried at the cemetery, primarily because veteran and spouse may be buried together, and even children. We have children who passed away and are buried with the veteran and spouse.
And then I've heard from some people who've attended. I guess I'm gonna guess that there are some semi-public or fully public events like Memorial Day. I'm guessing maybe there's a Veterans Day. Can you speak to any of those types of public events? I guess when this
Sure.
podcast comes out, it'll be toward the end of October, so Veterans Day would be coming up.
Yeah, we do not have a Veterans Day ceremony
Okay.
at that cemetery. We do have a Veterans Day ceremony at Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, which is where I'm actually at.
Oh,
All of our staff is at Golden Gate National Cemetery.
okay.
But we have a Memorial Day ceremony every year, except for the couple of COVID years, but we have a large Memorial Day ceremony at San Francisco National Cemetery that is widely attended. And then in December, we have an event called Wreaths Across America, which is held in all VA national cemeteries, as well as many other cemeteries, where wreaths that are purchased and donated are designated for any cemetery. And so those wreaths that are donated for San Francisco, there's a particular Saturday when we get volunteers who come and help us place the wreaths on grave sites, as many as we have, to commemorate and remember the veterans at that time of year.
Can you speak, and maybe there's just nothing to it other than it's just sort of a designated style, but anyone who's been to or driven past the San Francisco National Cemetery or the one that you're at down in San Bruno or Arlington, Virginia, or any of them,
Mhm.
there's a very specific headstone style. Can you tell us anything interesting about that other than?
Mhm. Generally speaking, the type of headstone is determined before a national cemetery is established or
Okay.
open. And so the one people are most used to seeing are the upright marble headstones. That's what they have. And I would say most of the national cemeteries,
Mhm.
but some of the newer cemeteries also have granite upright headstones.
Mhm.
And then there are cemeteries also with flat markers on the ground,
Right.
particularly for smaller cremation grave sites. And we have some of those at San Francisco National Cemetery as well.
Okay.
But those are types of headstones that are predetermined for each national cemetery.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily up to whoever it is being buried. It's a
No,
established
those are
pattern.
those are predetermined. And so, for example, at San Francisco, which is unique, but most of all of the government headstones are the upright marble headstones. San Francisco is unique because of its history with the Army,
Mhm.
in that it allowed private headstones to be installed. And so it makes it a very unique appearance in that they're not all uniform. You see many, many different types of private monuments. That's no longer allowed today, but that was something that was permitted under the Army. Um, and there are a few smaller cemeteries, older cemeteries, I should say, with that distinction.
Maybe my last question, unless I think of anything else,
Mhm.
any more sort of prominent individuals or names that anyone might recognize, either national history, Army history,
Mhm.
San Francisco history. I don't know.
Well, just generally, there are 38 Medal of Honor recipients
Oh.
at San Francisco National Cemetery.
Mhm.
There are also about 450 Buffalo soldiers buried at San Francisco National Cemetery, and they have a very distinctive history for having served with the 9th and 10th Cavalry during the turn of the century, and they were the ones who patrolled much of the middle of California, all the
Mhm.
way out to Yosemite and farther up north as well.
Mhm.
But in terms of individuals, you really can't turn around in that cemetery without seeing somebody who has a prominent history. We don't even have a full list of the who's who, but of course, Major Dana Crissy, who served with the Army on the Presidio and was killed in an air crash. Crissy Field is named for him.
Mhm.
And then we've also got Lieutenant John David Miley, who served, and Fort Miley was named after him, which
Okay.
over the years has now become San Francisco VA Medic Center, although many veterans you talk to will still call it Fort Miley.
Fort Miley.
And then Pauline Cushman Fryer was a Civil War era individual who served as a spy for the Union forces, and she was buried at San Francisco National Cemetery, and her headstone reads Pauline C. Fryer, Union spy.
Wow. Do you know, was she stationed out here, or why she ended up here?
No, she moved after the war, and several years after she moved out toward this way, but she was in the area where the Civil War was occurring, of course, and so
Right.
she was recruited by the Union Army to assist with gathering intelligence until she was found out and nearly hung, but for the intervention of the Union forces that liberated the town. She was in
Wow.
a timely fashion.
Lucky.
Exactly. I don't know if you can get any luckier. We have Phillip Burton, who's buried at the cemetery, who was a U.S. congressman. Some people may remember his name, and he is credited with helping to establish or create Golden Gate National Recreation Area. We have
very appropriate.
exactly. We have Major General Robert Tryon Frederick, who served during World War II and was the commanding officer of the 1st Special Service Force. And his outfit was called the Devil's Brigade, and there was subsequently a movie named for that. We do have, now I can't remember his first name, but Funston, for whom Fort Funston was named.
As a dog lover, I appreciate that.
We have Hunter Liggett, who was an Army officer who served in the Army, and Fort Hunter Liggett, further down south, is named for him. So many individuals who are prominent in primarily Army history, but certainly not exclusively. And also we have Sergeant William H. Tompkins, who was a Buffalo soldier and served during the Spanish-American War and received a Medal of Honor for his service during that war.
For folks listening to this, is the National Cemetery in San Francisco, is it open to the public? Can folks, walk in, walk around? Where can they go for more info also?
The cemetery is open for visitors every day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's small enough to walk and just take a look at the many headstones and just to see the inscriptions on the headstones. Some of them are extremely brief from the very early history, and then some are a little more informative from later on. But the cemetery is definitely open to the public, and we welcome visitors. More information is available through va.gov. The National Cemetery Administration has a link, and every national cemetery has a page within that link telling more about that cemetery, and then also notable burials and just general information as well. There's just so much history, and we'll never be able to capture it all. It's just incredible history. When you go back to like 1850s, there's no way to capture all that we've lost already. And it's really a shame. But the individuals that we do know about, I mean, their lives are amazing.
That's it for part 3. The final episode in this series will be all about the pet cemetery in the Presidio. Join us next Tuesday as we conclude this series. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Michelle Kilfeather does original photography for us. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 5th season, we have more than 190 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show. And drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, weird, and healthy. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.